An incident on the edge of the galaxy turns a member of the crew into a dangerous godlike entity in Star Trek the original series' first season, 3rd episode, Where No Man Has Gone Before. But what happened? What did I like? And what didn't I like so much? Before I get into this recap and review, please note this video contains spoilers, so if you've not yet seen this episode or any of TOS Season 1, this might not be the video for you. Let's warp into this. The Enterprise picks up a distress call from an old Earth ship, the SS Valiant, which went missing 2 centuries prior. Kirk and Spock play 3-dimensional chess in the recreation room, with Kirk jokingly teasing his emotionless Vulcan crewmate for his mixed ancestry. The ship's navigator, Lieutenant Kelso, interrupts their game, informing the captain of an object within range which is too small to be a vessel or an escape pod. Kirk orders the object to be beamed aboard and recognizes it as an old ship recorder, this one belonging to the Valiant, which due to its damage, Spock surmises must have been destroyed. Despite being Star Trek's 2nd pilot following the Cage's rejection, Where No Man Has Gone Before was the 3rd episode to be released. Why? I'm not sure. NBC's reasoning at the time was that the episode contained too much exposition, but I don't really see that. Both this episode and The Cage did a great job of throwing us into the world and building our knowledge as we went along. Now with streaming and home video, it's easy to correct the running order of episodes, but imagine watching this back in the day and seeing this after episodes The Man Trap and Charlie X. It would be jarring, right? En route to the bridge, Kirk and Spock are joined by Lieutenant Commander Gary Mitchell, an old friend of Kirk's and the ship's helmsman. On the bridge, the crew are joined by the ship's department heads, including Dr. Elizabeth Denner, who Mitchell refers to as a walking freezer unit after she rebuffs his flirting. Spock interprets the Valiant's distress signal and learns the ship was pulled out of the galaxy and that its crew were frantically researching extrasensory perception on humans before its captain ordered a self-destruct. Eager to know more about its fate, Kirk orders the Enterprise continue on the Valiant's original heading, a course that will take them outside the galaxy. Approaching the edge of the galaxy, the Enterprise encounters a strange energy field which Spock is unable to scan, but Kirk orders them to continue on their heading. The Enterprise enters the field, but the ship is soon rocked as energy discharge hits the ship, causing major damage. Kirk orders Mitchell to reverse course, but the helmsman, along with Dr. Denner, are hit by an electric charge and knocked unconscious. Thanks to Spock, the Enterprise escapes the field but suffers 9 casualties, as well as major damage to its engines and power cells. Kirk orders immediate repairs and tends to Denner, who appears uninjured, and Mitchell, whose eyes now glow a strange silver. What The Cage arguably lacked was warm character interaction, something this episode makes a real effort to correct. Replacing Jeffrey Hunter's Captain Pike is William Shatner, whose James Kirk, as we know, would go on to become a culturally significant character. A large part of what made Kirk so appealing was his charm, which is felt almost instantly here, his contrasting friendships with Spock and Mitchell, establishing the character as a captain far more dynamic than his predecessor. Spock's decoding of the Valiant distress signal did feel a little drawn out, but ultimately was important to propel the action towards the barrier of the galaxy in a sequence that still holds up pretty well despite its age. The reveal of Mitchell's new silver eyes, while very dated and clearly a frozen shot, remains an effective and dramatic conclusion to the scene and first act, and is one of my favourite enduring memories of this episode. Spock discovers the 9 casualties all had high ESP test ratings, with Dr. Denner and Mitchell having the highest rating among the ship's crew. Spock is concerned about the more extreme abilities of humans with ESP, but Denner defends the condition as not harmful. Kirk assigns Denner to work with Mitchell, who he visits in sickbay, reminiscing over their early days at Starfleet Academy. Mitchell surprises Kirk with newfound abilities, such as the increasing ability to rapidly read books on the ship's computer, as well as a changing personality and attitude that concerns the captain. Later, Denner visits Mitchell, who apologizes for his earlier behavior on the bridge. The two become intimate over classic romantic poetry, with Mitchell wondering why the Doctor isn't exhibiting the same abilities as him, despite also being hit by the energy charge. In a briefing, the crew discuss Mitchell, whose rapidly growing abilities and changing attitude are becoming a concern. Denner arrives and attempts to defend him, arguing his new powers aren't dangerous and could give rise to what she describes as a new and better kind of human being. Spock advises heading for the nearby Delta Vega, where they can use the planet's power station to repair the ship, but also maroon Mitchell, whose exponentially growing power will soon become uncontrollable. Kirk rejects the plan, unwilling to abandon his friend on such an isolated planet, but Spock counters, coldly telling the captain the only other choice would be to kill Mitchell. Now understanding the Valiant's dilemma, Kirk reluctantly orders the Enterprise to Delta Vega. The concept of a man corrupted by ultimate power wasn't exactly new in 1966, but the episode, much like many Trek episodes to come, does an excellent job of making it feel fresh with its sci-fi setting and emphasis on cause and effect. Mitchell, played by Gary Lockwood, known to most perhaps for his appearance in 2001: A Space Odyssey, is perfect in the role. His transition from a trusted crew member to a cold and ruthless godlike being perfectly sold by him and perfectly bought by his concerned shipmates. Having said that, the development of the character does feel a little rushed and overly simplistic at times. While I understand the need to quickly define Mitchell as a threat for Kirk to get into a fist fight with, I do wish we'd seen more of a conflict with Gary as he tries to cling on to his rapidly diminishing humanity. Rushed as well is Kirk's decision to maroon his old friend. Mitchell's powers are growing at an alarming rate, something which is very nicely spelled out in layman's with Sulu's coin explanation, but Kirk's decision is reached far too quickly and lacks the conflict you'd expect from a situation like this. And the less said about Spock's attitude, the better. He just wants to kill him right away. The green-blooded devil. Approaching Delta Vega, Kirk and Spock head to sickbay where Mitchell is now demonstrating telekinetic powers. Mitchell reads the minds of his colleagues and subdues them with electric charges, telling them he won't allow them to abandon him. Mitchell's growing arrogance distracts him, however, affording Kirk, Spock, and Dr. Denner the opportunity to tranquilize and beam him down to the planet. Mitchell is transported to the power station on Delta Vega, confined to a holding cell whilst the crew salvage the components needed to repair the Enterprise. Regaining consciousness, Mitchell attempts to escape the cell, but is overwhelmed by the force field containing him. The silver glow fades from Mitchell's eyes as he calls out for Kirk, appearing to return to his old human self. But the moment doesn't last. The silver glow returns as Mitchell defiantly tells his old friend and captain that he'll just keep getting stronger. Accepting his friend is no more, Kirk comes round to Spock's cold logic, instructing Kelso to rig the station to explode should Mitchell attempt to escape. As the landing party prepare to leave, Dr. Denner tells Kirk she intends to stay with Mitchell. Kirk orders Denner to return to the Enterprise, while Mitchell takes advantage of the distraction, using his telekinetic powers to strangle Kelso to death with a cable. Mitchell then shocks Kirk and Spock and easily escapes the force field holding him, before approaching Denner, whose eyes now also glow silver. Delta Vega is a planet that we'd see again. Well, kind of. The planet featured in J.J. Abrams' 2009 reboot movie and was a barren ice planet located somewhere between Vulcan and Earth, and not a barren rock planet on the edge of the galaxy. Let's spare any canon gymnastics and just assume that there are actually 2 Delta Vegas. Mitchell's momentary return to humanity gave us some additional complexity, but the moment was brief and ultimately confused. Is Mitchell possessed by some sort of ESP alien, or is the power just shrouding his mind? It's never really explained, and that's a shame as it could have potentially added to the tragedy of the episode. Mitchell killing Kelso felt like a big deal, feeling like the point of no return for the character and the moment his humanity had truly been lost. A lot of what makes this work so well is the great effort by director James Goldstone, who had a reputation for building cliffhangers within episodes and holding attention with pacing that can definitely be felt here. And more silver eyes. Again, another memorable moment is Denner's reveal in the mirror. It never fails to give me chills. The silver eyes were created with laminated foil, which apparently wasn't very comfortable and proved very difficult for Lockwood to act through. Watching the episode back, you can clearly see redness around his eyes, indicating the experience probably wasn't the nicest. Despite the discomfort, Lockwood's performance actually benefited from them, with the godlike Mitchell seemingly looking through his crewmates at times. Clearly unintentional, but a powerful side effect for sure. Dr. Piper arrives and revives Kirk, informing the captain that Mitchell and Denner have escaped. Kirk orders the doctor not to revive Spock and recommends the Enterprise hit Delta Vega with a lethal dose of radiation should he fail to stop Mitchell. Kirk then heads off in pursuit of his former colleagues, armed with a phaser rifle Spock had beamed down earlier. In the valley away from the station, Mitchell and Denner use their powers to create an oasis including water and fruit. The two sense and approaching Kirk, Mitchell suggesting Denner speak with Kirk, hoping she'll realise humanity's insignificance compared to them and their growing powers. Kirk passionately pleads with Denner and appears to get through to the doctor, but before she can take action, Mitchell appears and easily disarms the captain. Mitchell creates a grave and forces Kirk to his knees, demanding the captain pray to him as a god for an easy death. Growing conflicted by his inhumanity, Denner uses her powers to attack Mitchell, who temporarily loses his powers, but not before retaliating against the doctor, who collapses to the ground. Taking advantage, Kirk attacks his former friend, knocking him down, but hesitates long enough for Mitchell to recover. The two fall into Kirk's open grave, but Kirk is quick to escape, grabbing a phaser rifle and blasting the rock, causing a large chunk to fall, trapping Mitchell and burying him alive. Kirk approaches a critically injured Denner, who apologizes to the captain before succumbing to her injuries, leaving Kirk alone to mourn her sacrifice as well as the loss of his friend. Back on the Enterprise, Kirk adds Mitchell and Denner to the list of casualties from the mission, telling Spock Mitchell didn't ask for what happened to him. Spock tells Kirk he felt for Mitchell as well. "I believe there's some hope for you after all, Mr. Spock," says Kirk with a weak smile as the Enterprise departs. It's kind of maddening that the success of Star Trek ultimately boiled down to executives loving the fist fight at the end of this. The scene's fine, although the use of doubles always makes me laugh, which kind of kills any intended tension. But this was just the way of things at the time. Television shows like Star Trek, predicated on a Western genre foundation, always needed some sort of action-packed finale, and love it or not, it had to end this way to get the studio's seal of approval. Credit to the show, however, it did manage to take a dust-up and give it a suitably Trekkian spin, with Shatner's impassioned plea to Denner, followed by Mitchell's musings on life and power. It was all vaguely intellectual, and that was enough for me. Despite a bizarre original airing placement, Where No Man Has Gone Before is a solid early episode, a decent compromise between the original pilot's heady sci-fi concepts and a more mainstream-friendly format. The performances, particularly Mitchell's, were effective and memorable, while Shatner showed early glimpses of promise with a performance that showcased his dramatic versatility that is still underrated to this day. What lets the episode down a little, however, is the execution of its intriguing core concept that sadly feels a little rushed, as well as a lack of depth and complexity in what would ultimately become the show's main antagonist. Minor gripes aside, this is a good early episode, one which handedly proved thinky sci-fi could indeed work with the masses. I'm giving Where No Man Has Gone Before 3.5 stars out of 5. But what did you think of this episode? Did you love it? Did you hate it? How would you rate it? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more Star Trek content just like this coming soon. Until next time, I'm the Trek Lad. Live long and prosper.